Recorded Books presents Dogs Don't Tell Jokes by Louis Sachar, narrated by Christopher Gebauer. 1. This story begins with a smile. It was a stupid-looking smile on a rather stupid-looking face. Maybe it was the smile that made the face look stupid. Or maybe it was the face that made the smile look stupid. It was difficult to tell because the two were rarely apart. It was the smile on the face of Gary Boone. He was in the 7th grade at Floyd Hicks Junior High School. Just about everybody there thought he was a goon. They called him Goon right to his smiling face. "You're an idiot, Goon. You know that?" Paul Wattenberg said to him one morning. "No, as a matter of fact, I didn't," Goon said, then laughed. He called himself Goon, too. On the first day of school, his math teacher, Miss Langley, asked him his name, and he said, "Goon." "I beg your pardon," said Miss Langley. "See, my name's Gary Boone," Gary explained. "So you take the G from Gary and the oon from Boone, and you put them together and get Goon. Ha, ha." Miss Langley went on to something else. Last year at the end of 6th grade, Gary was voted class clown. He took it as a great compliment. He wanted to be a stand-up comic when he grew up. Or a sit-down comic, he would sometimes say, if my legs get tired. Unfortunately, however, nobody who voted for him meant it as a compliment. They never laughed at his jokes. He was simply the obvious choice. Gary often daydreamed about being on a late-night talk show, sitting next to beautiful starlets and other celebrities, cracking jokes. Naturally, all the starlets would fall in love with him because he was so funny. Sometimes Miss Langley would be up on stage with him. "You were his 7th grade teacher, weren't you?" asks David Letterman. "That's right," says Miss Langley. "But even then I knew he'd grow up to be a famous comedian. Of course, as a teacher, I never would let myself laugh at his jokes. I bit the insides of my cheeks raw to keep from laughing. He was so funny. I only wished I was 15 years younger." Miss Langley happened to be one of the most beautiful teachers ever to teach 7th grade math. At night, when Gary dreamed about her, he called her Miss Longlegs. He dreamed about her surprisingly often, at least once a week. "Hey, Goon," said Matt Hughes. "Has anyone ever told you you're an idiot?" "Yes, thank you," said Gary. "Paul mentioned it this morning." Haha. 2. Gary wrote a story called The Boy Who Ate Fire for English class. Mrs. Carlyle was his English teacher. Someone in the class had asked how many pages the story had to be. "Whatever's appropriate," Mrs. Carlyle had answered. That was her big mistake. The Boy Who Ate Fire by Gary W. Boone. Once upon a time, there was a boy who ate fire. He died. Mrs. Carlyle refused to accept the story. "It's not a story," she said. "It's only one sentence." "Two," corrected Gary. She told him he had to rewrite the story, and that it had to be at least 5 pages. She said it was a good title, but it doesn't tell what happens. "But that's what happens when you eat fire," said Gary. "You die." It was supposed to be a joke. Mrs. Carlyle didn't laugh. Someday, Gary thought, his story would be published. It would be a big, thick book and cost $19.95. The Boy Who Ate Fire by Gary W. Boone. Then you'd open it up and it would just have 2 sentences, followed by 300 blank pages. It would be...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.